Welcome to the Tony Steuer podcast, presented by Paperwork. Be prepared for life.
Welcome to the Tony Steuer podcast, presented by Paperwork. I'm pleased to be joined today by Terrell Dinkins. Terrell is an author, president, and founder of OBN Wealth Advisors and president of One Bucket Nation. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Building Wealth One Bucket at a Time strategy and Terrell's book, Secrets of the 800 Plus Club, How to Raise Your Credit Score, Maintain Good Credit, and Live the Life of Unicorns. Terrell, welcome to the Tony Steuer podcast.
Thank you so much, Tony, for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So am I.
Fantastic. Well, let's plunge on in. So this is where I always start. Can you tell us a little bit about what is your origin story and how did you get started in financial education?
You know, Tony, I will go all the way back to childhood. I have actually always had a love for financial education. And I think even as a young child and going into college, my mother always put an emphasis on saving money. So I was always fascinated with compounding. And I know that may sound kind of nerdy, but the whole thought of you putting money away and then that money multiplies. So that goes back to childhood. And then when I turned 18 years old, I've always been a saver. And by the time I turned 18, I had saved up $8,000. I thought that was a lot for
Wow.
Yeah, by the time I was 18, I had $8,000 in the bank. And that was a lot for an 18-year-old. So I've just always been intrigued with the power of compounding. So I majored in finance in college. I went to Georgia Southern University. I was a finance major and I minored in banking. So I was really a nerd and I have always loved it. But I think it was really and truly my fascination with how money grows and how money multiplies, and wanting to always share that with other people. So it goes all the way back to childhood, the origin of my store, the origin of my love for financial education. And knowing too that if you have your finances in order, that you don't ever have to worry, you sleep good at night. Because money isn't everything, but it does make you sleep well at night. And if you have your money in order, you do sleep restful. I sleep great knowing when I don't have any debt. So that whole feeling of financial freedom that comes along with money was, I guess, pushed me and catapulted me in wanting to learn more about it and look at the importance of financial education.
Well, that's great. And I love the term financial freedom because I think that's what people should strive for, is to not be, I guess, managed by their money. They should manage their money rather than be managed by their money. I did have a follow-up question because you mentioned the concept of compounding as a youngster. How did you come across that? Was it your parents or?
My mom, she was, a long time ago that they were, and I was born in the 60s, so I'm really telling my age, but she always said, if you put money in a savings account, then it will grow. She always talked about making your money grow. And, back then your parents, they, especially when interest rates were a lot higher, they could get great returns on certificates of deposit. So she always talked about the importance of savings. If you put your money away, it'll grow. You'll have something for a rainy day. So that was something that was instilled in me as a young child, especially for her daughters. My mother was a widow at the age of 34. My father passed away at 36. So she really put an emphasis on women. She said, you in case you're alone, because she was alone. She was a widow at an early age. So she really emphasized the importance of saving money. But the whole compounding thing came when she would talk about these CDs that if you put in $100, you may get $110 or so that was something that I learned about, and she shared with us at a very young age. And that was kind of fascinating that if I put in $1 amount, then once it matures or reach maturity, then I'll have more.
Well, it's such a great concept and it's so foundational. And I'm sure, as you've probably seen, is a lot of adults aren't even very familiar with the concept.
You're absolutely right. We could, but since this COVID and this pandemic, the savings rate has actually gone up. People are saving their dollars. I think I read somewhere that the savings rate had gone up 14%. So more and more people were saving money. I think it's sad that it took a pandemic for people to understand the importance of saving and paying down debt, because people are paying down their debt and realizing too that they actually had money, that there was actually disposable money available to pay down debt. So I'm hoping that once everything opens up, that people will remember the lessons that they learned during the pandemic, that they do have disposable income to invest and to put money in other venues for wealth building.
Yeah, I share that same hope. And, I think it also, emergency funds are also something I think really people started really taking seriously, is like, hey, I need to have an emergency fund going forward. We've been talking about in the financial services industry for a long time, put aside 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, it's so important. That's the foundation for that. That's like financial literacy 101. I think, everyone says you got to have that emergency fund. You have to have the emergency fund because, a lot of people lost their jobs and they, encountered this huge emergency, and why it's so important to have that money set aside.
Yeah, that's great. It is important. So, you're the president of One Bucket Nation. Can you tell us, why is it important to think about building wealth one bucket at a time?
First, I love how you said my company name. I'm gonna answer your question, but I also want to share the reason or the purpose behind that company name. There's something, if you do some research, there's something magical about your buckets and having buckets for emergency. In biblical times, people would use their buckets to, transport food, to pull water. So the buckets reminds you or makes you think about abundance. So I think, I came up with that company name, One Bucket at a Time, because it's easy to create wealth in steps. And so that whole premise is to make it easier for people to think about the basics first and then doing a buildup. So one bucket at a time is focuses around the steps and the buildup to eventually get to some things that are a little bit riskier. So that's why I named the company One Bucket Nation, to create a nation of savers, a nation of people who are starting to, start from the foundation and creating these steps of building wealth, one bucket at a time.
Well, that's great.
To get to abundance, because that bucket represents abundance.
And that's such an important concept. And I also noticed that your advisory name is OBN Wealth Advisor. So you're committed.
So so I gotta tell you a little bit a story about that. So my first initial is O, and when I started my firm was approved, it was the year of I'm telling you my age, my 50th birthday.
Sorry.
So So it was the beginning of something new. OBN, my first initial was O, and beginning a new stage in my life, starting the
Oh,
firm at the age of 50. So when I was coming up with the company name, I was like, this is a beginning. I'm beginning a whole new stage in my life. And the BN, beginning new, and then my first initial, and then I also had this other company, One Bucket Nation. So I just felt like it was meant for me to have that OBN because it represented the whole concept of One Bucket Nation and me starting this whole new phase in my life. And I've
that's
never
great.
shared that with anyone. So
Well, I noticed that. I thought it was actually One Bucket Nation is you for the wealth advisors
yeah, so it
firm.
was my initials, and I was like, okay, this is this. People will probably think it's One Bucket Nation too. So
Well, I did. I fell for it. So,
yeah.
but it's always interesting, to hear these stories because I, I think it gets people thinking about the perspective. And I think one thing that's exciting is that you started a second career and a whole new thing that was fun and exciting, and you're making a difference, and that's neat.
It is. It really is neat. A whole new. Well, it was me starting going out on my own because I was working for a firm before. I worked for a firm here in Atlanta, in the north side of Atlanta in Buckhead for 7.5 years. And then I ventured out and decided to open up my own practice. So I was working with them. I was a contractor because, we're not employees. So I was a contractor with the firm for 7 years, and I decided that I wanted to go out on my own because I wanted to do more planning, because I didn't want to be tied to any product, but I really wanted to do more planning because I am very passionate about the financial literacy. And when you have the freedom to just educate and not have to worry about products, that's what I love. And you get a certain age, you have the financial capacity to do it, because in this industry, it takes money to be in this industry. You have to have startup costs set aside, because you don't make money for a while.
Exactly. It's a hard industry to get your feet wet in to
It
get
really,
that start.
yes.
And I love it because I think the financial services industry should be centered around planning rather than product driven. Unfortunately, that the industry isn't ready to make that shift yet.
Well, because everybody wants to make money, but there's a shift in our industry because I think people are creating, going to my model where they really want to work and do what is in the best interest for the client and educate. It's important. I love that part of what I do, educating and talking to them about things beyond the investments, like the budgeting part. And I think that is so important to have a budgeting piece when you're creating a plan for a client.
100%. It's like you have to have a handle on that so you can take the next steps. You have to build your house, from the ground up, not
That
just from the middle.
that fundamental first bucket. And so even with my first book, which was, One Bucket at a Time, A Woman's Guide to Creating Wealth, I talk about these four buckets that every woman should create throughout their lifetime so that it will last them a lifetime. And that first bucket is that emergency bucket, that cash bucket that you need in case you're in a pandemic or you lose your job. And I've had friends in 2020, they lost their job, and I even had a client who was out of work for a long time before the pandemic. So going into a pandemic didn't help, but she was prepared for this situation.
That's great because she followed the system.
Follow the system. She had her money buckets.
Exactly. It does work. So let's talk a little bit about your most recent book. So tell us about your book, Secrets of the 800 Plus Club: How to Raise Your Credit Score, Maintain Good Credit, and Live the Life of Unicorns.
Yes, yeah, I'm really excited about that book, Tony. So I again, it wasn't my intention. Something happens in my life that will just say you need to write about this. So my new book is meant for people, do-it-yourselfers, and then to shut down people that are scam people out of their money, because the credit thing it's a huge industry. So many people are vulnerable because of their credit. If you have a low credit score, then you're going to be paying more money for your car, you'll pay more money for your house, you'll be paying more money when you're financing just your everyday purchases if you use a credit card. And because of that credit score, there are so many people out here that are scamming individuals to pay thousands of dollars to help raise the credit score. Well, I had over an 800 credit score, and I'm like, it didn't cost me thousands of dollars. There were some tricks that I learned along the way that has allowed me to not only get an 800 credit score, but maintain a credit score. So the book was written for people who, wanted to do it themselves and not pay someone to help them raise their credit score. It's Poor credit is also one of the contributing factors to the wealth gap. You will have people that have poor credit, and these people are spending so much more money for little things. I met this little young guy. He had bought his first car. His interest rate on his first car was 29%. 29%.
Wow.
Because he needed a car and he didn't have credit. So it's things like that that gets under my skin. I'm sure yours too, Tony, because you're just as passionate as I am about financial literacy. So my goal and my vow is to always write books that will help the everyday person to build wealth, or in the case with my brand new book, raise their credit score, because poor credit costs you money, but excellent credit will provide you access to lower interest rates. You'll have premium credit cards and greater spending power when you have excellent credit.
Yeah, well, I think that's so important, is those are the things I think are often missed in the financial literacy conversation. Is it's a very foundational building block that impacts so many other things, your credit score. And something I learned from some of the financial planners I work with is that for example, if you save, I mean, this, if you save 1% on expenses, you're getting an extra 1% in return.
That's
And
right.
so managing your credit score helps you with your budget because it gives you more cash flow.
It gives you more cash flow. And here's the thing, Tony, it's not, some people have this misconception that people that are poor have poor credit because they just don't know. I've worked with people, and I can just kind of just putting together their plan, and looking at when you're doing a plan, you're pulling documents and looking at the interest rates and guessing that their credit scores is bad, or they have a low credit score. And these are people that may have six-figure incomes, but may not have the best credit because they don't necessarily know all of the secrets and how to raise that rate up. Or they don't even think about it because they have enough money coming in. They don't have to think about their credit. Sometimes people are, if you have great income, I don't have to think about my credit because I have the cash and I have a credit card, and I pay it. So I don't have to really think about how much me having the poor credit is costing me each month because I have great cash flow. So it can almost fool you. I have great cash flow, so I don't have to really worry about my credit. And you do.
Yeah,
Because it's
exactly. I mean, you have to look at your financial life holistically, and it's nice to see a book written about something like that. My first book was Questions and Answers on Life Insurance, and it's not an exciting topic, but all the other books on life insurance were basically like, you read them and it's like, go buy a whole life insurance policy. I want to write a book that was actually like people could use it, like you, to learn something to help them make a smarter choice.
Right. And in the book, Tony, I break it. It's like a workbook. I actually had a reader who sent me a message saying, I've just finished the first lesson. So I wrote the book like a workbook. So you actually have steps. Pull your credit report. Go here and pull this item up. Write down your interest rates. Get on the phone and call your credit card companies, because people don't realize you can actually call your credit card companies and ask them to lower your interest rates. I've done that before. Or call them and see if they have any type of specials that are going on that will, lower your interest rates. Right now, I think I have a credit card that has a 0 interest. And here's the thing, if you have great credit, you will get these great offers in the mail, because if you're paying your credit card on time, what these credit card companies want is that they want you to, suddenly not pay so that they can make some money off of you. So they entice you with these great offers. We'll lower your rate down to 3% if only you will, not pay that credit card off, for the month. And then that way we can make some money.
Yeah, or the balance transfer. Send you
Exactly.
those checks.
Mhm.
Hey, write yourself a check. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's very nice of them.
Yes,
Credit
it is.
card companies. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, one of the things we've talked about, and this is how we met through Females in Finance, is what are some of the specific challenges for women with financial literacy?
And I will not, this is not the case with all women, but for some women, especially women that may have, they've gotten married and had kids, and, their spouse took care of the finances. A lot of times women didn't make a place for themselves at the financial table in their household. So then, divorce, which is high, you get a divorce and then you're starting all over again. So that's one issue, not having a financial voice in your household. And I think it's important to have that financial voice, even if it means that, yes, my spouse will take care of the finances, but I know what's going on. And that is an issue. And I've seen that as an issue of women not knowing what's going on. And that's so important, because we're born with a blessing and a curse. And that blessing and a curse is that we will probably outlive our male counterparts. And the curse is we will probably outlive our male counterparts. So longevity could be a curse, because you're going to be here a long time alone. And I grew up in a household where my mom was alone at a young age, and she was a widow a very long time before, she remarried. I was an adult before my mother remarried. So I grew up in a household in that situation. So because I saw it, I knew the importance of knowing how to manage a household in the event that you're alone. And then of course too, we typically tend to be caretakers. If especially in this pandemic, you have more women leaving the workforce than men. So we left the workforce, it put us behind. If we were making contributions to our 401k plans, that suddenly stopped because we left the workforce to stay at home to take care of the kids. So we typically are caretakers for our children, for our parents. And because we are doing the caretaking, we have less time to build wealth. So that's why that is so important for women in general. If you leave the workforce, figure out a way that you can still contribute. And it doesn't always have to be in a retirement account. You can save money in other places.
Well, that's great. That's helpful. And the other thing too is it made me think of the gender wage gap. Is not only are women living longer, they're earning less money, and
That-
that it just creates more challenges.
It creates a whole lot of change. We live long, we make less money. And I'm hoping that, gosh, close the gap. Part of, Women's History Month, we need to be pushing closing the gap, and that's that wage gap. And you would think it's since 2021 that still should not be an issue, but it's still an issue.
You would think there's a lot of we could go down a lot of paths with that, but
Rabbit hole on that.
but yeah, it's 2021. You think, but yeah, some things haven't changed too much, unfortunately. I know even, with my wife, I think she got a pay increase at her job as a result of a settlement because the women who had a specific job classification were making less than men with the same job classification.
Wow.
So she got a nice pay increase in a settlement because of that. And it's like, seriously, if I told you the company name, you would know it.
Oh,
So I don't want to call them out, but
yeah.
on my podcast, but it's not like they were a little firm. So it is scary. It's still an issue. I think for people who are listening and watching this podcast, it's why, as Terrell was talking about with her book, is that you need to go out there and do your homework, think about the facets of your financial life, and take a look at all these different things. Ask questions, learn something.
Please do ask questions and don't be afraid. You know what? Google can be your best friends. We're out there. Ask questions. And seek out, a financial advisor. Seek us out. And in my case, I think Tony, you and I were talking. People feel intimidated about reaching out to advisors, and I understand that. And so I wrote books that were designed for people who kind of were in the beginning stages. They're not going to, they don't have the money to invest with an advisor, but they can learn about the money buckets, or they don't have money to pay someone to help them with their credit score. So they can figure out how to raise their credit score and be brave enough to, call the credit card companies to get their interest rates lower, because now they're a better steward with their finances. So yeah, ask questions and seek people out. Don't be afraid.
I love that. That's a great quote there. So as we're talking about this, and how do you feel we can improve financial literacy and financial education?
That is a huge question. So I feel like I know so many people like yourself. We're talking about this all the time, but we don't necessarily know if we're reaching the masses. So I really feel like this should be something done in schools. I feel like schools need to not just have a month on financial literacy, but this needs to be a course. One of the things I think is so fascinating, and I had a client to say this, that if she saw a time value of money calculation, that she would have been, if someone had shown her a time value of money calculation, then she would have done a better job early saving money. So going back to schools, I think financial literacy needs to be done in school, but not just basic financial literacy. Students who are interested, they need to see things like time value of money calculations, that if you put X amount of dollars away per month, this is what you'll have when you reach, retirement age. We need to see more of that. Kids need to see more of that. That needs to be taught in high school. And I've heard a friend of mine who is a teacher, she said they're starting to have these classes. But I think people need to know about it while they're young, because everyone's not going to have, my son can talk to you about a Roth IRA because he has me as a mom, but his peers can't.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. It should be just woven into the curriculum. And I know in the state of California, they're starting to talk about that. It's, how do you apply it in your math classes? How do you apply it in, across the board? But yeah, and a standalone class is so important. Kids going off to college are going to be faced with all these issues, and they're being asked to take out these loans that could impact them for 40 years, and they don't have the tools to evaluate the student loans.
Oh, and I talk about student loans in my book. Student loans, oh my goodness, that can hinder your lifestyle. People that are, and I have a sister who sells real estate, young peoples that are, I feel really bad for the young adults because they may not ever be able to purchase a home the way we purchased a home, because they have Sally Mae on their back. These student loans are taking away their ability to maximize the amount of house that they could potentially qualify for because they have to pay back student loan debt.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean it's a huge issue. That's a whole one on its own. Student debt. But I think for parents, if you have a kid, I know my kids in high school, and we're talking to him about that. It's like, yeah, you can go to any school you want, but there's a price to pay for going to that school. So you have to think about that as one of your factors in choosing your college is, what do you want to be, your lifetime burden for that?
Crucial conversations. And you know what happens? Kids change their majors, or some of them will decide, well, college is not for me. But we need to have crucial conversations that, hey, if you go to this school and you take out this loan, this is what it's going to cost you when you graduate, because you will have to pay back that loan. And so it's going to eat into your lifestyle. Those are crucial conversations that you need to have. I had that conversation with my son, saying, let's try to minimize the loans, look at some of the options besides, taking out student loans.
Definitely. It's so important. So as we wrap up, can you share with us what's your number one tip on being financially prepared?
Being financially awake and aware
Nice.
of your personal situation. Being financially awake and aware of your personal situation, because you cannot be a good steward if you don't know where you're starting from.
That's
So you
great.
need
And
to
that gets back to you.
yeah,
That gets back to your bucket.
yeah, back to my book, is you gotta know where you are. Is I in my book, my first book, I talk about, facing the woman in the mirror, facing the man in the mirror. You need to know where you're starting from. So that's the tip, is knowing where your starting point is, being awake and aware of where you are at the very moment financially. And then you
Yeah,
can start.
definitely. That's why I tell people, I go, there's a reason why on a map it says you are here.
You are
You
here.
know, you have to know where you're starting from so you can figure out, how to get where you're going.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the same is true your financial life.
Yes.
So Terrell, where can people learn more about you and implementing your money bucket strategy?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So you can go to my website, onebucketnation.com, and learn more about me. And you can find both of my books at onebucketnation.com as well. And also too, Tony, my my new book, Secrets of the 800 Plus Credit Score, has become an Amazon bestseller. So I made the Amazon
Awesome.
bestsellers list in a couple of categories. So it's doing well. You can also find that book on Amazon. You can, put in my name, Terrell Dinkins, in the search bar, or put in Secrets 800, and the book will come up.
That sounds great. I like that. Secrets 800. and congratulations on hitting the Amazon bestseller list. That's thrilling. And for our listeners and viewers, I will be posting links in the show notes. And if you go back to my website, you'll find links to Terrell's books and everything else so you can connect with her. So Terrell, so speaking of connecting, is there a way where people can follow your work? Would that be through One Bucket Nation, subscribe to a newsletter, or LinkedIn?
So if you are interested in my work, you can go to my other company website, which is obnwealthadvisors.com. obnwealthadvisors.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Look me up on LinkedIn, Terrell Dinkins, and I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. And I'll have all those links in the show notes. So Terrell, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Tony, for having me. This has been great. I love just having a conversation with you.
Well, myself as well. I'm just honored to be able to talk to you and just to learn something new myself. So gave me some new things to think about. So appreciate your time today. And everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Tony Steuer podcast presented by Paperwork. Please remember to subscribe. Until next time.